At 53, Brian Rolapp stood in front of every camera at the PGA Tour's global media event and announced a restructuring that changes how professional golf operates from 2028 forward. 6 pillars. He called them 6 pillars. He named the first one in his opening statement, and it was enough to make every analyst in the room go quiet. Promotion and relegation. In professional golf, the words were not buried in a footnote or a follow-up interview. They were the opening line. 3 years fans watched this tour position itself as the defender of traditional golf. 3 years of defending full fields, meritocracy, the 36-hole cut. The message was always the same. This structure works, this structure is fair, this structure protects the sport. Rolapp walked in and dismantled that message in under 4 minutes. What exactly he laid out beyond that first pillar, who it hurts, who it protects, and why he chose this week to pull the trigger. That is what the next several minutes will cover. Every layer, the players affected, the events at risk. The one question he still has not answered publicly. Rolapp did not just announce a schedule adjustment, he opened a door that has been locked for 3 years, and what sits behind it changes how every fan should understand this tour going forward. If you have watched this tour through the LIV split, the merger talks, the framework agreement that went nowhere, the next few minutes will either confirm what you already suspected or prove you completely wrong. You need the full picture before you decide which one it is. Personally, I think Rolapp just ended the old PGA Tour in one press conference. If you see it differently, tell me below. And if you want honest golf talk without the corporate spin, stick around. The timing question has a specific answer, and it starts with what Rolapp spent 22 years building before he ever walked into a PGA Tour office. Television deals, media rights, content packaging. That is the lens he applies to everything, and it explains why June was the moment. The next major broadcast negotiation is approaching, and whoever walks into that room needs a product that looks different from what exists today. Rolapp was not brought in to protect the schedule. He was brought in to make the tour worth more on paper. Think about what that means for a tournament like Colonial or the Heritage. Those stops do not exist in Rolapp's framework as traditions. They exist as content slots. If a slot does not drive viewership or hold a casual audience through 4 days, it becomes expendable. The 36-hole cut, the full field, the Monday qualifier, none of those are sacred to a man who spent 2 decades packaging football for broadcasters. They are variables, adjusted when the numbers demand it. Golf Week reported that Rolapp identified 3 specific things he wants to bring from the NFL into professional golf. One of them is the concept of tiered access, where the biggest events function like playoff games, limited fields, higher stakes, must watch or you miss the moment. That is not how golf has operated for 70 years. That is how the NFL sells Sunday afternoon. Seeing golf through television numbers explains the timing. It does not explain the format choices, and that gap is where this gets uncomfortable. 5 more pillars followed the first. Each one touches a different part of the structure, a different group of players, a different tradition that fans have relied on for decades. The second pillar addresses field sizes at elite events, expanding them while tightening entry criteria. The third restructures how players move between tiers, creating a formal promotion pathway that did not exist before. The fourth concentrates purse money at the top, pulling resources away from regular events and funneling them into signature weeks. The fifth restores the 36-hole cut for lower-tier events while removing it from the biggest tournaments. The television explanation covers the why. The actual structure goes somewhere a broadcast deal cannot account for, and the sixth pillar is where the real story lives. Before getting to that sixth pillar, the first 5 need context. On their own, they sound like administrative adjustments. Bigger fields here, smaller fields there, money moved from one bucket to another, routine stuff. Except none of this is routine when you look at who benefits and who gets squeezed. Take the tiered access model. Under this structure, the top tier plays the signature events, the second tier plays the regular events and competes for promotion. The bottom tier fights to avoid relegation. That is not how a professional golf tour has ever operated. That is a franchise system wearing a different jacket. A player ranked 120 in the world right now can still earn his way into a signature event through strong play. Under the new model, his path narrows significantly. The fields expand at the top, yes, yet the entry criteria tighten. The Aon Swing 5 standings, the FedEx Cup points race, the returning member program, All of those pathways get restructured. For a guy grinding on the Corn Ferry Tour trying to earn his card, the door he is walking through just got smaller. Tiered access sounds clean on a presentation slide. For a player fighting to keep his card, the math looks completely different. The ripple effect goes deeper than one player missing one event. When Koepka withdrew from Colonial last season, 2 alternates lost their tee times. Zach Blair and Patrick Fishburne went from having a spot in the field to watching from the parking lot. One decision from one superstar changed 2 careers. Now multiply that by an entire structural overhaul. Every scheduling decision, every entry rule change, every purse redistribution sends waves through the bottom of the tour. The players ranked 50 through 150 are the ones who absorb the impact. They do not have lifetime exemptions or sponsor deals guaranteeing their income. They play week to week, and the ground under their feet just shifted. Under the returning member program, Koepka's status creates a specific mechanical problem. When he enters a tournament, the field expands to accommodate him without displacing an existing member. When he withdraws, that expansion collapses, and the alternates behind him lose their positions. It is a rule designed to protect the returning player. What it does not protect is everyone else. The player ranked 160 counting on that alternate spot for FedEx Cup points, for sponsor visibility, for the ability to cover travel costs. Those players do not get a press conference. They get a text message from their agent saying the field shrank. Rolapp addressed the LIV question in his opening press conference. His exact words, reported by multiple outlets, were that there is no merger coming. He said the tour is not spending a lot of time thinking about bringing LIV players back. He said he does not pay much attention to LIV Golf as a competitor. 3 statements, 3 separate dismissals. On the surface, that sounds like confidence. A CEO who is not worried about the competition. 3 dismissals in 1 press conference. The question is whether that confidence is genuine or whether the structure he announced makes LIV irrelevant by design. Because here is what those 3 statements do not address. If the PGA Tour builds a tiered system with limited elite fields, concentrated purse money, and promotion relegation movement, what exactly is the difference between that product and the one LIV launched in 2022? LIV had 54 players. LIV had massive purses at the top. LIV had a team structure that created narrative drama every week. Rolapp's 6 pillars do not copy LIV's format exactly. They do not need to. The underlying architecture is the same. Restricted access at the top, financial incentives concentrated among a small group, a lower tier that functions as a feeder system. The branding is different. The mechanics are not. LIV used a shotgun start to compress the broadcast window. Rolapp's team has discussed compressed formats for signature events. LIV guaranteed appearance money to its players regardless of performance. The concentrated purse model in the new structure does the same thing for the top tier. LIV built its identity around team captains selecting players in a draft format. The promotion relegation system creates a similar dynamic where movement between tiers is decided by a combination of performance and structural positioning rather than pure merit. Every element has a parallel. None of them are exact copies. All of them point to the same architectural philosophy. CBS Sports reported that Rolapp insists the tour is not spending a lot of time on LIV. Golf Channel analysts have pointed out the contradiction. Brandel Chambly said it directly. The tour is veering dangerously close to the LIV blueprint. He said it on air with 20 years covering professional golf behind him. The tour's response was silence. No rebuttal, no clarification, no statement saying Chambly was wrong, just silence. Chambly named the contradiction out loud. That silence is doing more talking than any press conference could. For the fan watching at home, the practical changes start in 2028. Fewer full-field events on the calendar, more signature events with restricted entry. The tournaments that have existed for 40, 50, 60 years, Colonial, the Heritage, the Farmers Insurance Open, those events survive only if they fit the new tier structure. If they do not generate the viewership numbers Rolapp needs, they get reclassified. Maybe they become second-tier events. Maybe they get moved to a different slot. Maybe they get cut entirely. Rolapp said the new structure will uphold tradition. He said it in the same sentence as announcing a model that has no guaranteed spot for any tournament, regardless of history. Behind every one of those tournaments is a local economy. The Heritage supports hundreds of volunteer positions in the Hilton Head community every April. Colonial funds junior golf programs across Fort Worth. The Farmers Insurance Open generates tourism revenue for San Diego in January when the city needs it most. These are not just television products, they are civic institutions. When a tournament gets reclassified or moved to a different tier, the broadcast revenue changes, the sponsor commitments shift, and the local organizations that built their annual budgets around that event get no say in the decision. Rolapp's 6 pillars do not mention any of that. The USGA distance debate adds another layer. Rolapp said everything is on the table regarding the golf ball. Bifurcation, rollback, different equipment rules for different levels of play. That statement alone signals that the game the fan recognizes is being reconsidered at a fundamental level. The ball you hit at your Muni course might not be the ball a Tour Pro hits in 2028. The distances change, the course setups change, the strategy changes, and it all happens under the same umbrella of restructuring that Rolapp announced in June. Format changes, access changes, purse changes, and now the equipment itself. Every layer of the game is being touched at once, and that is not a coincidence. Colonial hosted its 80th PGA Tour event last year. 8 decades of history. Players like Hogan, Nicklaus, Watson, Crenshaw built their legacies on that course. The heritage has been a staple at Hilton Head since 1969. The Farmers Insurance Open has been a January tradition at Torrey Pines for over 60 years. These are not just events on a spreadsheet. They are the backbone of what made the PGA Tour feel different from every other sports league. They are the reason fans drove 6 hours to watch Thursday. They are the reason a small town in South Carolina or a coastal stretch in California mattered to someone in Ohio or Minnesota. Rolapp's restructuring does not guarantee any of that survives. The speed of all this matters. Rolapp was announced as CEO in June 2026. By that same month, the full 2028 restructuring was unveiled. 6 pillars, a complete competitive model, promotion and relegation, tiered access, all of it in under 30 days from his official start date. That is not a man learning the job. That is not a man consulting with players, gathering feedback, studying the tour's history. That is a man executing a plan that was already built before he walked in the door. Golf Digest reported that substantial changes depend on progress in the next several weeks, meaning the timeline is not flexible, meaning the decisions are already made, meaning the window for fan input, if it ever existed, is closing right now. Golf Channel asked whether this is the biggest moment of Rolapp's PGA Tour career. That framing is too small. This is not a career moment for one executive. This is a structural moment for professional golf. The last time the tour underwent a change, this fundamental, was the creation of the FedEx Cup in 2007. Before that, it was the split from the USGA in 1968. Those changes took years to develop. They involved committees, player input, extended debate. Rolapp delivered his in a single press conference. No committee, no player vote, no extended discussion. 6 pillars and a timeline. The FedEx Cup took 3 years of player consultation before it launched. The split from the USGA in 1968 involved months of negotiation between tournament directors, players, and the governing body. Both changes were debated publicly. Players voted, committees met, dissenting voices were heard. Rolapp's restructuring bypassed all of that. No player vote, no public consultation period, no committee report. One CEO, one podium, one timeline. The players were informed, not consulted. That distinction tells you who holds the power in this new structure and whether the voices that built this tour still have a seat at the table. Speed tells you whether something was planned. 30 days from arrival to full restructuring is not a learning curve, it is an execution. He did not say the words, he never will. No CEO stands at a podium and says, "We spent 3 years fighting a competitor only to build their product ourselves." That is not how press conferences work. Yet the structure says it. The tiered access says it. The restricted fields say it. The concentrated purses say it. The promotion and relegation says it. Every pillar points in the same direction. The PGA Tour's fight against LIV was never about protecting the format. It was about buying time. Time to study what worked. Time to identify the pieces worth keeping. Time to build a version that carried the PGA Tour name instead of the LIV name. The suspicion you carried for 3 years was correct. The merger talks were never going to produce a merger. The framework agreement was never going to produce a framework. The tour was going to absorb the model regardless of what happened in those negotiations. At 53, Brian Rolapp confirmed all of it. Not with a quote, not with a confession, with 6 pillars, a press conference, and an 18-month timeline. The admission is the structure itself. You suspected they had a plan. You suspected the fight was theater. You suspected the tour knew exactly what it was going to become. Rolapp stood in front of cameras in June and proved every suspicion correct. The old PGA Tour, the one with full fields and open qualifying, and the idea that any player on any given Sunday could win, that tour is being restructured into something else. Whether that something else is better or worse is not for a CEO to decide alone. It belongs to the fans who built this tour's identity over 70 years. The question now is not whether golf is changing. It already has. The question is whether the people who built their weekends around this tour, who drove to Colonial in the Texas heat, who watched the Heritage from Hilton Head for 20 years, who treated the Farmers Insurance Open like a January tradition, whether those fans are going to accept what professional golf is becoming, or whether they are going to demand a seat at the table before the next pillar gets announced. Rolapp gave you the admission. What you do with it is the part he did not plan for.